the tale of Tyquan Nate, the GD assassin who trained Chicago's youngest hitters. Southside Chicago, the part of the city where bullets fly faster than dreams. In these blocks, names don't just hold weight, they hold blood. And when you hear 007 Nate out of Southside Chicago, you're not just talking about a hitter. You're talking about a teacher, a leader, a menace, a general. This is the story of Nathaniel Hicks, aka 007 Nate, a Tyquan world, to be more specific, which is a faction of younger generations of JARO City. 007 Nate not just only known for catching bodies, but for molding the new and next generation of Tyquan world. He recruited them and turned them to become the killers. Tutu was a prime example of a JARO City member that was trained to be a killer under 007 Nate wing. Wasn't only tied to violence, he was also recognized for shaping the future of Tyquan world. He mentored and transformed new members into ruthless enforcers. Born on July 14, 1994, Nathaniel Hicks grew up in the ruthless streets of Chicago, deep in Tyquan world. A GD set locked in a long-standing war with the BDs, came up in the unforgiving environment of Chicago's South Side. He grew up deep inside Tyquan world, a branch of the gangster disciples. GDs locked in a bloody and never-ending feud with their rivals, the Black Disciples. To say Nate was a product of his environment would be an understatement. He was molded by it. The streets around him weren't just neighborhoods. They were battlefields where every corner held danger and every block was claimed in blood. Nate was raised in that era. Blocks turned into battlefields. But unlike most shorties who followed the crowd, Nate led it. From early on, Nate stood out. While most of the shorties followed behind the older guys, Nate had a presence that made others follow him. Even before the war between Tyquan world and the BDs reached its bloodiest stages, before bodies started dropping fast on both sides, Nate was already carving out a reputation. They called him 007, Nate because of the way he moved. Like a secret agent, he was quiet, calculated, and always one step ahead. When he put in work, it was with precision. When he struck, it was without hesitation. Deadly, efficient, and disciplined. He didn't move sloppy like the average hitter. That's what set him apart. But it wasn't just about the work Nate himself put in. His influence stretched further. He wasn't only feared for what he could do, he was respected for what he could make others do. Nate had a gift for recruiting, molding, and some would say brainwashing the younger generation. He trained shorties like soldiers, instilling in them the same cold, calculated mindset he lived by. By the time he was 22, people were already calling him OG Nate, a title that usually takes decades in the game to earn. His leadership and aura made him the kind of figure others wanted to be around, even if it meant risking everything. Nate didn't just move like an assassin, he created assassins. And not only just Tutu many guys in Tyquan world, a JARO City member who rose under Nate's wing and became a feared name in his own right. And then there's the whispers, stories that show how deep Nate's name ran. One of the most infamous tales is about a shooting. Many believe Nate actually pulled, a hit that JARO City Mikey ended up taking the fall for. Mikey served 13 years behind bars for it, carrying the weight of that case on his back. Years later, when Mikey got into it with a female from the neighborhood, she aired out the truth. It wasn't Mikey behind that trigger. It was 007 Nate. This came out when JARO City Lil Mikey got into it with a female from that way. She said, "Hey look, Mikey 062. It's not my fault you did 13 years for a person who has nothing to give or offer you. It's not my fault you feel entitled to what me and my cokehead friend Real FYJ man have going on. If you're going to be mad at anybody, be mad at 007 Nate. He the one made you sit down 13 years, and he don't got $13 or 13 cents to give you. You shouldn't feel entitled to anything I got going on or think you should get paid the same as me because I kept you relevant. Men lie, women lie, but numbers don't. That's why we aren't in the same pay grade or bracket. And it's crazy. Just a couple months ago, you was giving me my flowers until you started hanging around people whose gate I done jumped. This my last reply to you. The difference between me and you is I never had a person knock my teeth out my mouth and still walk this earth. Go use those teeth to talk about the folks who knocked them out. From this day forward, I'm moving out the condo I've been living in your head rent-free. I ain't healed all the way. This was the duality of Nate's story. Part feared hitter, part mastermind, part manipulator. He embodied the trenches, becoming both a product of his environment and a force that shaped it. His rise wasn't just about catching bodies. It was about crafting the next wave, ensuring Tyquan World always had soldiers ready to step up when called. But like so many legends of Chicago's gang wars, his story wouldn't end with the glory his name carried in the streets. Instead, it would end behind prison wall. The streets may have made him a legend, but the system made sure that legend would never walk free. This is the story of Nathaniel Hicks, aka 007 Nate, a Tyquan World GD not just known for catching bodies, but for molding the next generation of steppers. This is the real-life tale of the man behind the murder of 051 Melly, and how he became a legend in the trenches before landing behind prison walls. When you think about it, Nate molded a ruthless group of shorties. Guys like Terry Berry, TB, Biko, once known as one of the scariest figures on that Tyquan World side. Before his death, TB had already built a reputation with at least 3 confirmed bodies to his name, each one added to his infamy, and each one told a story of how unpredictable and ruthless he really was. One of the most shocking incidents was the murder of his longtime friend, Front Street Capo. The two had shared history, coming up from the same environment. Yet that didn't stop TB from pulling the trigger. What made the situation even colder was how he handled it afterward, jumping on Twitter to publicly mourn Capo, as if he hadn't been the one behind the killing. That contradiction, killing a friend, then crying over him online, showed just how twisted the game had become. Not long after, TB struck again, this time targeting Melvo from Nico Gang. Unlike Capo's death, TB didn't try to hide this one in grief. Instead, he bragged online, posting in a way that made it clear he wanted people to know. To him, it wasn't just another shooting, it was about building a reputation, making sure his name carried weight in the streets and in the digital world. He wanted his work documented, a living record of what he had done. But what really made TB infamous wasn't just the bodies, it was his signature habit. He had a ritual before pulling the trigger. He would ask his targets where they were from. It wasn't curiosity, it was psychological. It was TB's way of making his victims speak their last words, forcing them to declare their hood, their loyalty, right before he ended them. That's exactly what happened with Melvo, and later with T. Roy. Both times, TB asked the same chilling question, "Where you from?" And both times, the answer was followed by gunfire. It was as if TB needed to hear it, a final confirmation before he decided their fate. By the time TB met his own end, he wasn't just another name in the war. He was already a figure etched into the bloody history of Chicago's gang conflicts, remembered not only for who he killed, but for the cold, calculated way he did it. A 16-year-old boy was fatally shot in a silver car late Friday in West Inglewood. Police said the driver ran. The victim, Cook, was sitting in the car when someone walked up and asked where he was from. "I'm not about that," he replied. Then, shots fired. His friend wasn't hurt. His mother, Lakeisha Cook, said, "I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how I'm going to bury him. I just bought a plane ticket to Mississippi, and now he's dead." Everyone knows TB killed T. Roy in broad daylight at a grocery store, but he suffered the same fate. HK and McAdoo caught him in Paxtown. 34, address 45 on the front porch. Couple to the head, one to the neck, arm, victim extremely critical. Poppy, who is TB's best friend, was another soldier. Nate also raised guys like D-Money and Lil Tay. D-Money was the killer of J-Do, and he invented J-Do Jump Out Boys. D-Money ended up being killed too after a year. Tyquan World, named after Tyquan Tyler, was born of tragedy and vengeance. They linked heavily with STL EBT and JARO City, At one point, basically the same. At first, some Tyquan and 051 Young Money were cordial, but after Melly's death then, they went head-on with 051 Young Money. They have had prolonged war with O Block, Front Street, and 600. But the bloodiest wars came with 051 Young Money. This wasn't rap beef. It was genocide in neighborhoods because of all Nate did to the gravedigger Melly, whose real name is Yarmel Williams. On the battlefield, 007 Nate was a field general. Folks said he planned many retaliations, plotting get-backs, teaching shorties how to move, stashing blicks. He didn't have to slide every time. He had an army who would. Then came the infamous night, September 1st, 2019, a regular summer night in Chicago, but by morning the city shook. A house party, neutral ground, or so it seemed. Melly, top hitter from 051 Young Money, pulled up. Supposed to be cool, there's no such thing. With 007 Nate in the building, stories vary. Some say Melly was lured, others say he came cocky. By the end of the night, shots rang out. Melly laid lifeless, but the sad part is FBG Duck did warn Melly not to go to the party. But you all know Melly the gravedigger himself, always liked to be himself. There is video on Reddit and on YouTube which I can share it all due to YouTube guidelines. There was a guy recording in the video says, "They shot Yarmel." Inconclusive. I've been asking myself the question, how could the guy had time to shot videos? That's so quick. You gotta be a different type of folk to still attend house parties, knowing you got multiple bodies and people want to kill you. The thing is, a lot of people don't know these killers have a heart. Be thinking they soulless. And I know folks with hella bodies that still pray to God every night and spread the word of God. After Melly got killed, rumors flew Nate did that. 007 caught Melly slipping. In 2022, during the investigation of Yarmel Williams' homicide, Nathaniel Hicks, aka 007 Nate, a Tyquan world, was rearrested for first-degree murder, but the charges were dropped. I always knew they would be dropped because in that vid you can't see who actually fired shots. It'd be crazy I got friends that beat cases, but it seemed like CPD want niggas back on the street shooting shit. Witnesses identified him. Surveillance caught him entering with a gun and fleeing after. He was arrested September 3rd, 2019 with the murder weapon. Prosecutors found the evidence credible but refused to prosecute. No witnesses cooperated, and Nate never confessed. Detectives closed it exceptionally cleared, but in the streets, his name exploded. After Melly's death, 007 Nate's rep hit legendary levels. To enemies, he was a devil. To his block, a hero. Social media lit up. 007 Nate turned shorties into steppers. He made drill real. Young dudes stopped just claiming blocks. They caught charges. Nate wasn't hiding, he stood on it. But when you live that life, it comes back. In 2023, cops responded to a ShotSpotter alert. Multiple arrests, guns recovered. In the group mugshot, clear as day, Nathaniel Hicks, back in custody at Pontiac Correctional Center, medium security. Still the name rings. Tyquan World still claim him, and he is the face of Tyquan World. 007, Nate is an outstanding member. Like TB said, Nate put in that work. He got 3 bodies allegedly. One of his homies from TW said that in a Facebook post. CPD just lets everyone out, or maybe like most of these cases are impossible to convict without a rat. Y'all ever thought of that? I'm saying some of these cops like that. These folks be killing each other. Why TF is this dude being freed? Cops just arrest you. The DA prosecutor decides if there's enough evidence to proceed, prosecute. If it was up to the arresting officers, every nigga they put in cuffs would be doing football numbers. Police have nothing to do with man being free or no. They work only on arrest and collecting evidence and shit like that. Lessons from the story of 007 Nate. The life of Nathaniel Hicks, also known as 007 Nate, is more than just a gang tale from Chicago. It's a cautionary story about leadership, influence, choices, and the destructive cycle of violence. When we carefully examine his rise and fall, we uncover a series of lessons that speak not only to street life, but to human nature, society, and the role of communities in shaping destinies. The first lesson: leadership is powerful, but can be misused. Nate was not just another soldier in the streets. He stood out as a leader and organizer. His ability to recruit, train, and inspire others proved he had natural charisma and strategic thinking. He could have easily applied these qualities in positive directions, business, mentorship, or community building, but instead he used them to mold the next generation of shooters. This teaches us that leadership itself is neutral. It depends on how it's applied. When directed towards crime, leadership creates destruction, but when directed towards growth, it creates opportunity and empowerment. Nate's story shows the danger of leadership that lacks vision beyond the streets. The second lesson: violence is generational and self-perpetuating. Nate was himself molded by the wars of older generations in JARO City and Tyquan world. Instead of breaking free, he reinforced the cycle by training young shorties to follow in his footsteps. Kids like Tutu and others grew up idolizing him, not as a role model for success, but as a role model for violence. The lesson here is that cycles of violence pass from one generation to the next. Each retaliation creates the excuse for another. Without meaningful intervention, children inherit wars they didn't start, and the tragedies multiply. Nate became both a product and a producer of this endless cycle. The third lesson: street reputation comes at a heavy price. 007, Nate's name carried legendary weight in Chicago's gang culture. To his allies, he was a protector and mentor. To his enemies, he was a devil. His reputation was built on precision hits, discipline, and leadership. But the price he paid for this fame was prison and lifelong surveillance by police. This shows us that the so-called glory of the streets is deceptive. Respect built on fear does not last. It doesn't bring true stability, freedom, or peace. It brings paranoia, constant danger, and ultimately loss of freedom. Nate's glory elevated his name, but it destroyed his life. The fourth lesson: youth can be manipulated and exploited. One of the darkest truths about Nate's story is his ability to recruit and manipulate shorties. He shaped them into killers, instilling in them his calculated and cold mindset. For kids with no father figures, no strong family support, and few opportunities, Nate's mentorship became their version of guidance. Sadly, it led them into destruction. The lesson is that poverty and neglect create openings for exploitation. When positive mentors are absent, negative ones step in. Young people naturally seek leaders to follow, but without community investment, they often end up following those who weaponize them instead of uplifting them. The fifth lesson: human beings are complex and contradictory. Nate was both a feared assassin and a man who, like others, still prayed to God at night. His protégés, killers with multiple bodies, were still described as having hearts and struggling with their own humanity. This reminds us that even the most violent individuals are not simply monsters. They are human beings with contradictions. Understanding this complexity is essential if we ever want to address the root causes of violence. Seeing them only as soulless killers prevents society from tackling the deeper issues of trauma, poverty, and identity that shape such lives. The sixth lesson: social media fuels violence and reputation. Nate's associate TB became infamous for not only killing but also bragging online, using Twitter to mourn someone he himself killed or to boast about shootings. The internet became an extension of the battlefield, where street reputations were broadcast and amplified. The lesson here is that technology doesn't just reflect violence, it accelerates it. Social media turned killings into content and reputations into viral fame. This creates a dangerous cycle where young men feel pressure to prove themselves not only on the streets but also online, escalating conflicts further. The seventh lesson: the justice system struggles with gang violence. Nate was arrested multiple times and even tied to Melly's murder, Yet charges were dropped due to lack of cooperation from witnesses and the street's no snitching code. Though the streets knew his name, the courts could not legally hold him accountable. This lesson reveals that law enforcement alone cannot solve gang violence. When fear of retaliation silences communities, prosecutors lack evidence. This shows the need for deeper social change, addressing the roots of why communities distrust the system and feel safer staying silent even when killers walk free. The eighth lesson: wasted potential is a tragedy. Nate was intelligent, disciplined, and organized. He had qualities that could have made him a successful businessman, teacher, or even community activist. Instead, these gifts were consumed by the streets and directed toward destruction. This is one of the saddest lessons. Potential without opportunity can become dangerous. Society often fails to provide young people with constructive outlets, so their talents are twisted into survival skills for the streets. Nate's wasted potential stands as a symbol of how much talent is lost in environments where hope feels out of reach. The ninth lesson: violence destroys entire communities. Every act of violence ripples outward. The victims' families grieve, the shooters' families suffer, and neighborhoods become trapped in trauma. Mothers like Lakeisha Cook, forced to bury children, are reminders that the war isn't just between gangs, it's a war that consumes communities. The lesson is that no one wins in gang wars. Entire neighborhoods pay the price for every shot fired. Trauma becomes inherited, and communities are stuck in a cycle of loss and fear. The 10th lesson: consequences are inevitable. No matter how disciplined, intelligent, or ruthless Nate was, he could not escape the reality of street life. His story ended not with wealth, freedom, or peace, but with prison and lost years. His legend remained, but his life as a free man was taken. The ultimate lesson is simple: the streets only end in death, prison, or lifelong trauma. Even the smartest, most feared, or most respected figures cannot outmaneuver the inevitability of consequence.